The Modern Startup Accelerator has an anniversary this year. We're going to check in on the format and how to move it forward today on Builders Live. 20 years ago, thing that we now consider kind of the modern startup accelerator, relatively short, compressed time frame of injecting serious programming for an entrepreneur to advance their company quickly, typically with a thing like a demo day at the end. That started 20 years ago, what we call now Y Combinator. Good or not, lessons learned or not, we're going to talk a bit about that, how the format has changed, evolved, and where it should go next. To do that, I'm joined by Heath Naquin. He's now the Senior Vice President of Innovation and New Ventures at the University City Science Center. Heath, thank you for being here.
Yeah, Chris, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So University Science Center, 50 plus years in Philadelphia, where technically got started, but a classic kind of evolving economic development strategy with a place-based element, an innovation district, as it were. We've often seen the Science Center as an example of something that we see around the country. So your insight's going to be helpful, and they'll be insights that we'll take elsewhere around the country. But I want to start first because you came across my desk lately with some LinkedIn screaming you've been doing. ITs. Give me your recent innovation theater and kind of general LinkedIn takes to set up our conversation.
Yeah, sure thing, Chris. No, and yeah, I've been probably spamming a little bit much on.
No, I love it. The algorithm takes care of that, Heath. Don't worry.
Well, I mean, there's that. So I mean, whether they're doing a good job screening or not, I don't know. So a couple of things that I think are critical that at least I've been talking about, and we at the Science Center have been really focused on lately, and we're talking about on LinkedIn and other channels too, and we incorporate into our program, is that when we talk about the evolution, you led with the evolution of Y Combinator and the Modern Startup Accelerator, that sort of thing, and we are a place-based organization in West Philadelphia, and there's a number of similar type organizations around the country. We are trying to figure out where we can deploy our resources, our convening capabilities, and sort of our presence within the community to be really value added when you start looking at the sort of startup to investment to building economic output for regions space. And in our case, just for those that aren't aware of the Science Center, we're very med tech focused, right? And that adds another layer of complexity to the equation because software as a service is very different, and that's where Y Combinator really came from. It's very different than med tech acceleration. So I've been screaming about things like, okay, we need to convene with purpose. Happy to bring investors and startups together, but for what outcome and what are we trying to engineer in that outcome? 1. 2, how do we increase the pool of available early stage capital in a region, and not just like, oh, we need more capital. It's like, how do we bring in more resources in the early stage med tech space, in our case, capital into a region, and really engage with that capital community and tie it in with our local capital community as well. So it's like to tie it all together with everybody. And then 3, I've also been screaming about, regulatory pathways and evolving components of that relate to current shutdowns. I mean, I'm not getting into politics, it's just a reality. And then how do we help our constituents plan for and sort of account for that, especially in the medtech space overall. So those are the areas I've been sort of screaming about. I'd be glad to dive into any of them, Chris.
Well, so let's start with what we think of as Startup Accelerator, because I'm, like it or not, as you alluded to, like, Y Combinator did meet a moment of when digital transformation had aged to a point where cheap money could chase relatively quick wins that did fill at that moment market niches, mostly in and around consumer technology, though it moved toward more enterprises, it matured over time. It met a moment, and then that informed strategies around the country real quick in that cheap money 2010s era. I don't know of many regions that didn't have some version of, okay, we're going to do a compressed curriculum and inject some of what we know to be basics for mostly web-based companies initially to run real fast, get capital, test a market niche.
Yep.
There are good things that we learned in how do you compress down scale and focus on speaking to customers very quickly. There are a lot of like truisms out of there that I think no one doubts as being important, kind of in entrepreneurship culture. So maybe like, I want you to give some flowers. Like, what is good about the accelerator format that should go nowhere? And we'll go from how to improve upon it after. But first, like, what do we know?
So yeah, 100%. So like, if we go back to the good things from like the modern accelerator model, whatever you want to call it. I mean, in some ways, I think we're not going to get into what could be better yet.
Yep.
But a fundamental premise of what made Y Combinator so great is they were highly selective on the companies that came into this, and they were selective from an investment lens. They were originally, and still, I mean, arguably, they were screening for investment for the intake into the program. I mean, you look at stats, it was harder to get into Y Combinator than Harvard. I mean, it's pretty hard, right? When it started,
right.
That selectivity, I think, and that lens that was used was one of the secret magical things about that made the accelerator model work so well, because that led to investors wanting to engage, because they're then looking at, hey, I would have seen this company anyway, but they're already sort of down selected and screened for me according to the criteria I believe in. Now we can have a real conversation. And then on top of that, so that trusted investor community component of things, that's another good model of like that we can learn from or take from the Y Combinator, is that building the investor community sort of trust and connectivity with that, whether you call it accelerating or whatever you want to call it, with that intervention in that ecosystem is huge and very important and shouldn't be lost. And then you could argue about whether one of the things that Y Combinator did do is they, you can go online today and get the Y Combinator safe. It's literally a thing, right? So they were trying to decrease barriers to access to capital by creating and experimenting with new capital models, right? And so the safe was, they got this, not that they necessarily invented the safe, but it was more, they definitely made it in vogue to use, and you start seeing this pop up around the country. I remember a time like even 4 or 5 years ago where if you try to bring a safe into Philly, the East Coast was like, oh no, we're not touching that. And now they're like, yeah, we'll do it. Yeah. So it some innovative ways to move money. Is I think a useful thing to sort of keep and overall. And so I'll stop there. There's a lot of good about the model, but let's.
For sure, and let's build on it. Right? I think that's the point is absolutely creating the category. Let's build on it. I think a lot about how place-based economic development strategies need a daytime, nighttime strategy, and I've seen them get wrong both ways. You need a nighttime strategy. The meetup culture and the convening and the social element is important. I will fight you on it. You badly need the overlapping and the places for people to bump into. And I think economic development leaders often overlook the importance of the social. But, which I think is a theme that you've hit on, you also do need the daytime strategy, by which I mean, how are you taking either inventors, researchers, or just like neat idea havers, and how do you take that and bring you through a system in which we know how to commercialize science, research, or clever ideas to package you best for accessing capital if it's helpful, or going to market and validating as fast as possible as well. So I will defend the nighttime strategy, but I think accelerators often have a kind of nighttime strategy, which for me, I mean kind of a social element. Talk to me a bit more about the daytime strategy, like what really needs to be inside a serious either accelerator program or however you want to use the term. Like what are those signals now that we need to improve upon or make sure are part of a program to advance entrepreneurs?
Right. So I mean, and there are a number of different, as you mentioned, Chris. I mean, there's a ton of different interventions based on stage and where a company may be at. There's lean startup, I-Core stuff that has been run for many years now. That's that early stage ideation type work, which is critical, necessary, and helpful. There's a number of, whether you talk about like Main Street businesses, SBDCs, or learn from somebody for more mentorship stuff. All of these have a role within the ecosystem, all of it. For the Science Center, again, I'll go back to we're focused on medtech. That's one. And two, back to your comment about the sort of Y Combinator, time-bound, limited type thing, where we've landed in one of our flagship programs is our capital readiness program, which I'm going to do a shameless plug, and then I'll talk about what we at least think are the components or the daytime strategies of this. It sort of follows our philosophy, right? It's like, okay, what by the time a company's gone through accelerator 1, 2, 3, by the time they've gone through ICOR or a number of other things, or they've done their university-based programming or what have you, what are the gaps? What are the things they're still missing that prevent capital from flowing? And at least in what I've seen over the last 30 years, it ends up being pretty much the same buckets. It's usually not about the technology. It is usually about legal structures and founders agreements and not getting that house in order. It's usually about unrealistic awareness of the venture capital market, and meaning that I'm going to get venture. I'm like, should you? I mean, do you even know what your valuation is? Those types of things, and not, that usually does not get set up or really adequately discussed besides just venture 101 type. This is how venture works. In our program, we get really under the hood on valuations, comps, things like that, like an investment group would, right? In medtech specifically, regulatory is a big thing. Every medtech founder. I've posted about this. I was literally at a health in Vegas, a week ago. It's almost a joke now. If a founder says, "I'm a fast track 510K," everybody just shuts down from the investment lens, because that's whatever. Those are the buzzwords, but without the deep, like, are you really? And do you know what that means? And how much money is that going to cost? And, is your burn rate going to allow you to do this? The real tactical components of things, right? And then you can get into like the payer provider mix, which is, I can't navigate my own insurance plan, much less founders trying to navigate, no, I'm being serious, like the country's side of things, right? So those things, at least for us in MedTech, are in a time-bound thing. What we focus on in our program is valuations, legal, IP, regulatory, and really just getting into the venture mechanics and term sheet side of things. That's what we anchor our stuff on, and we're trying to sort of do something a little unique in those spaces, and really get under the hood more deeply than you would see in traditional work. So we're trying to solve a gap. Hopefully those are good things, and that's at least our daytime version of stuff. Now we have plenty of nighttime stuff too, Chris. So that's a different story. Yeah.
Well, and I know we were joking before the call, and other friends in other places know that I think I have seen people get it wrong both ways. They overlook the serious programming side, or it's only that, and they kind of think the social element will just come. Like, I think it's more important than you think it is. Let's touch on. So I want to kind of close. Before I close, because I want to get your take for entrepreneur guidance and the economic development leader guidance side of things. But before that, so we saw an explosion of accelerators around the country, lots of different reasons, and I think the journeys of Techstars and generators, who we technically work with a bunch, tell that story. There was kind of like too much, and then a retrenchment. Sometimes it was very focused on specific industries. Sometimes it went wide. Like, we have gone through over 20 years, a lot of different ways of how we think about accelerators. Economic development strategies love them as place-based work. Can I use an industry to attract people to my place, and then I hope to sink my teeth in them and have them stay? Or how do I get locals to stay here? There are others that are very intentionally not assuming, like Y Combinator pretty famously doesn't really care if you're going to stay in SF. They might want you there in person to have some time together, but then it's not explicitly like, we're going to benefit SF. But it sure did over time help.
Right. It absolutely did.
But it wasn't the first strategy. So talk to me, please jump in. Talk a little bit about how you balance place-based outcomes versus the company first.
Right. And so, you could, you look at the data over 20 years, I would argue that Y Combinator's approach of not explicitly making it about San Francisco, sure did a lot of good for San Fran along the way in the Valley, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, it's really helped build that sector up. So for the Science Center, at least how we look at it, and we've been around for 60 years, right? So we've been a part of this puzzle for a long, long time, and we'll continue to do so. In our programming, we are not explicitly focusing. Of course, we are supporting companies in the local region and area, but we're not explicitly focusing on that. Similar to Y Combinator, we are, of course, we bring in companies from Silicon Valley, Texas, Boston, you name it. You name MedTech hotspot, we bring companies in to our programming, and of course, local companies as well. What we've seen over the last couple of years, though, it's almost like this two-sided thing. One, it creates interest for our local investment community, like, hey, I wouldn't have seen this company if they wouldn't have come through. So this creates opportunities for our local capital community, right? It's a new deal flow mechanism. On the city economic development side, whether the company lands or not, physically lands, what we're starting to see is we're going to establish a clinical trial with one of the medical systems in the region. We're going to collaborate with somebody we met, meaning a law firm or accounting firm, or we're going to engage them. We're going to hire somebody to do biz dev in the area. Oh, we didn't know and didn't have a connection with this payer or provider network. We're now doing a pilot with them. And so it starts building these interactions through that initial convening, to your point, and some of the nighttime stuff too, where you're saying like, okay, you go develop a relationship, we beat you up in the day. Now go build some relationships tonight.
Yes.
We're starting to see some of that really anchor. And of course, some companies are, as they should, looking for incentives and other things in regions. And they're like, hey, there's a lot of cool assets here that we weren't aware of. And starting to, establish presence in the region. So I believe I answered your question. And when you think about, at least my take on it is that saying we're only going to be of service locally, that's great. And there are organizations that do that, and they absolutely should do that for the local economy. Where we sit and we think we can add value is pull from outside in to build more opportunity for the region, and hopefully in the future have more folks land in Philly to help grow the regional economy. And that's just our take on it so far.
A small little window here before I go to close with you. Generally speaking, where do the ideas come from? Who's coming through your program? They were practitioners, or they were in industry and they spotted an outcome, or they were outside.
It's really a mix. I know the question you're asking. We have everything from university typical R&D, like it started in a lab and then they've putted around for a while, and now they've done ICOR or something like that, and like, okay, we actually created a business now, and now what, right? Some of the most interesting founders that's come through our capital readiness program are the ones that are like, I spent 35 years at Medtronic and Stryker, and like they've done the circuit in industry. They know it well. And they're like, but I've never done a company. I've never had to raise fund. I used to beat up startups, but I've never been a part of one.
Yeah.
I never had to lead this. So those actually, in a weird way, are probably some of the most interesting folks that we work with, where they understand industry, but they're trying to understand the mechanics of how they go about this whole pathway. We see everything in between, so it's really a mix. But if I think that population just mentioned, that's been super interesting for me to see, and I think economically, bluntly, they're going to have a lot of good success too. Once they can get the startup formula right, they end up being able to leverage their connections and expertise over time. So that's just one take on it.
But the theme there is a degree of experience first. They've been in the research lab and found a breakthrough, or they've been in the industry and kind of spotted something broken.
Right.
In both cases, for something as regulated as broadly medtech, the experience is a key component. I think
it's certainly helpful. Certainly very helpful. Yes.
One more little question popped in. Actually, no, I'm long, so I can't do it. Let me just get your last kind of insight in evaluating an accelerator program. If I'm on the entrepreneur side first, what question should I be thinking about? What advice do you have for that entrepreneur who's deciding what or if an accelerator program at all is the right move for them?
Right, right. So at a high level, what I would give, and I literally had this conversation earlier today with an entrepreneur evaluating accelerator programs. I would say there's a couple things I would have them ask. One, do you take equity for your programming? Yes or no? You want to understand that up front. And if you are giving up equity, you sure as heck want to know what you're actually getting for it. Otherwise, that can create issues. So that's statement one. Two, what networks do you actually, or what doors can you actually open for me? Right? Not who are your instructors, not who's going to give me a lecture. I mean, that's great. What doors can you actually open for me that I didn't have otherwise? That's the other big thing. Three, everybody wants accelerators to give them investors. I mean, I think that's, yes, we do have, I mean, anytime we run a program, we'll have somewhere between 3 and 500 million in venture represented. We brought in billions in venture towards the region, or at least expose them to the region. It's like, it's not about like, hey, is an investor floating in your orbit? It's like, do I have a chance to actually develop a relationship with that investor or not in your programming? Is there the time in your structured program that allows that to actually happen versus just a cattle call with 15-minute, judging and stuff like that? I think those are the high level questions. I can get into a lot of nuances around regulatory, payer, things like that. Those are other components of things. But if I had to give the broad brushstrokes, before it asks about money or anything else, ask about equity, networks, and access. Those are the really bullets that I would focus on.
I'm over, but in the last 5 years, we've seen surging rates of business incorporation. In the 2010s, when you and I were doing tons of work, though our particular space of high growth sciences and technology companies were very hot, factually, we were in a terminal decline in entrepreneurship rates in the United States, despite our experiences. It's been the last 5 years that in the data, it's popped. And that's a lot of businesses that's showing up in restaurant and hospitality data as much as any.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm curious, from your seat, have you seen that post-pandemic entrepreneurship? Are those numbers showing up for you in any way? Like, oh, the apps are up, or the savviness of someone is more advanced than it was 10 years ago. Like, are you kind of seeing any signals of how our country's relationship to entrepreneurship has matured or grown?
So yes, and I think I'll just call it like the advent of AI and tools. You're starting to see that really rear its head in the entrepreneurship space. Anybody can create a beautiful pitch deck in like 5 seconds now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, literally. I mean, a Draper just literally downloaded his brain for 24 hours to give reviews for venture, right? I mean, so you're seeing all these really unique tools that entrepreneurs are leveraging these days, right? And that's all great. That's cool. I mean, I talked to the founder the other day with some of the coding apps that are out there, like AI, like no code type things like Replit and Lovable and stuff like that. The development timeline for an app that would have taken $1 million in like a year can be done in like a week, a month for like maybe $5,000. It's a whole different ball game. And the barriers, at least in medtech, it's basically become like a SaaS model, right? We're seeing that sort of happen a little bit. The difference, I think, is while we are seeing big numbers, we have this, and it looks great and splashy. There's still that tacit, real knowledge and the real ability to make business happen, people to people, that you can't GPT it. You can't, you can't, you don't want a hallucination on your patent claims, by the way, and don't get me started on that. You can't use that for your regulatory file. I mean, there are things that you cannot substitute human experience for. And I think that's sort of the magic here. We're seeing big upticks. Yeah, we're seeing everybody try and side gig and grow and things like that. I think there's going to be a part where it's like what's real and what's not, and who's actually working to do business versus trying to just do a startup-y thing because they saw Shark Tank. I think there's going to be another kind of correction that will occur because, I mean, it happens in waves. Saw it in .com, saw it in 2010, it's starting to happen again now. So we'll see how it goes down.
I'd love to ask you more, but we ran out of time. I so appreciate that's Heath Naquin. He's the Senior Vice President of Innovation and New Ventures at the University City Science Center. Heath, thanks so much for the time.
All right, Chris, thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Take care of yourself.
Next time. Bye,
Yep.
everybody.
Bye.